Russia is facing more sanctions from the United States and its allies over the alleged Bucha mass killing accusations as tensions between Russia and Ukraine continues to increase.
To know more about the details of steps where Washington is planning to take, we have VOA's correspondent Jessica Stone live from Washington, D.C. with us this morning right here on the C Morning Show. Good evening, Jessica.
Good morning.
Hi, good morning. Thank you. Jessica, U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken is participating in NATO meetings in Brussels this week. What is Washington willing to do to step up the pressure to Kremlin, Moscow?
Well, so far there is increased pressure here from Washington on the United States to declare this a genocide, those mass killings in Bucha. But the U.S. has been so far more cautious than President Zelensky, who has already called what happened in Bucha a genocide. Just for some context, it took 5 years for Washington to declare what happened to the Rohingya Muslims in Myanmar a genocide, and it's taken some years as well for them to declare what happened to the Uyghur Muslims in China a genocide. It is a legal finding, and it has to be ascertained under international law. But as you mentioned earlier, a raft of new sanctions announced on Wednesday coming out of those NATO meetings in coordination between the United States and the NATO members, including blocking all U.S. investment in Russia, sanctions against Putin's 2 daughters, as well as Sergei Lavrov, the foreign minister's wife, and a number of banking entities in Russia. Experts, though, saying that if Russia can still sell its oil and still sell arms, it will continue to be able to fund this war.
Jessica, there's been some discussion of NATO adding forces on its eastern flank. So what is Washington's approach to this?
Well, General Mark Milley, who's the top U.S. military commander, had some testimony in front of Congress on Tuesday in which he talked about a paradigm shift going forward in terms of U.S. military strategy and U.S. military strength. He said that 2 great power conflicts are increasing, not decreasing, mentioning Russia and China by name. He also talked about permanent basing, but not permanent stationing of U.S. troops in the Baltic countries, Romania, Bulgaria, and Poland. Milley said that perhaps those countries would be willing to pay for those bases while the U.S. can rotate troops in and out of them. And we know that Kosovo has already said that it is interested in talking more about that. But most interestingly, Mark Milley was asked about the timeline he sees going forward for this Ukraine conflict. He was asked, could it be a decade of conflict? And he said it is definitely a matter of years, not months, and that NATO countries and NATO allies in Asia should be prepared for that.
Hi, Jessica Paul here. Speaking of Asia, Russia's invasion of Ukraine has sparked fears in the Indo-Pacific region of perhaps similar moves by China against Taiwan or other sovereign states. In addition, we've also seen Australia speed up the timetable to purchase long-range strike missiles because of growing threats from Russia and China. So how's the Washington reacting to this?
Well, Washington grew very concerned when it learned of this new draft security plan between the Solomon Islands and China, because that would allow Beijing to base troops and military hardware in the Solomon Islands. It would give Beijing the ability to block international trade in that region and also block the United States from coming to the aid of Australia or New Zealand in the event of a Pacific conflict. So that's of great concern to Washington. And as you mentioned, we did see Australia also announce this week that it's going to spend $2.6 billion to fast track the arming of its warships and its fighter jets with long-range missiles. Those are very important because they're needed in any potential setup of a conflict with China. Of course, the Chinese PLA also has those types of weapons. And finally, we also saw the U.S., UK, and Australia announce that they will add hypersonic weapons, which the U.S. is behind China in developing, to the list of things they will help provide for Australia under the AUKUS deal that was announced earlier this year.
And Jessica, we're going to talk about also, this invasion by Russia does impact many things, especially on food supplies. Now, as we know, Russia and Ukraine are the biggest supplier for wheat. If this war will last longer, would it dwell? What can we expect in terms of food supplies, especially to the world?
Well, you may already be seeing the prices higher on bread supplies, even though I know it's Ramadan and you're fasting by day. Ukraine and Russia they account for about a third of global wheat supply, something you don't really think about until something like this happens. And then on top of that, you've got Russia and Belarus providing a lot of the components for fertilizer. And of course, those components are now sanctioned as a result of the global sanctions that are going on against Russia. Indonesia and Bangladesh among the countries most impacted by Ukrainian and Russian wheat supplies. Indonesia, as you know, has imposed a export restriction on its wheat supply. And so this is something the United Nations has begun talking about this week, asking countries not to restrict supplies of wheat to other countries and the free trade thereof. The UN Food and Agriculture Organization also saying that it's going to work with Australia, Canada, and Argentina, I believe, to offset the need for wheat. But again, this is a big hole to overcome, just one of the many ways globalization affects us all. And by the way, Ramadan Mubarak to all of you.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Jessica. Stay safe for you, and always thank you for your insightful updates. And we'll talk to you more regarding of the updates in the days to come. Thank you very much, Jessica.